Alrighty, so I think we're ready to go, and I'm going to present our presenter today, Alison Mackay, who is a financial aid counselor at the Scholarship and Student Aid Office here at McGill.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alison. I am one of the financial aid counselors in the Scholarship and Student Aid Office, and today I'll be presenting the webinar, Dollars and Cents, Planning for Your Time at McGill. I have been with the Scholarship and Student Aid Office just over 3 years. I work predominantly with US, international, and also out of province students. But in our office, we meet students from all jurisdictions. So I will hopefully be able to answer the majority of your questions today. As Sarah mentioned, we'll ask that you direct your questions to the chat or to her during the presentation. I'm going to be focusing on the presentation, but I will be taking the time to answer your questions at the end. So we'll start with the territorial land acknowledgement. McGill University is on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. So a bit about this webinar. Today we're going to talk about who is the Scholarship and Student Aid Office, what we do, and the services that are available to you from our office. I'll take a moment to point out that our office does serve all students, but predominantly undergraduate students. So I know that there are both undergraduate and graduate students potentially attending the presentation today. So as we go through, I will do my best to delineate how the services apply differently to these populations. Then we're going to jump into how to make a sound financial plan for your time at McGill. Where to get started, resources. This will give me the chance to speak in a lot more detail about the services and programs available to you from our office. We'll talk about expenses, how to create a budget, and then tools and resources available for managing your finances. And like I said, we'll take time for questions at the end. I will say that today is really meant to be an overview. So we're not going to get into anything in too much detail, but it's really meant to kind of help you orient yourself as you start planning and crunching the numbers for paying for your degree. So who we are, our office is proud to offer bilingual service, including advising and workshops on financial matters. This includes topics like budgeting, debt repayment, and loan repayment. We also administer the 14 government aid programs. So that's the 13 Canadian jurisdictions. In Canada, it's administered by province or territory. And we also administer the US Direct Loan Program. We can support students with their applications and appeals. We understand there might be a lot of questions right now surrounding government financial aid, and we are the office to whom you would direct those questions. We also administer McGill's need-based financial aid programs. Small disclaimer, the top item on that list is actually merit-based. So we do administer entrance scholarships for first-time, first-degree students. Merit-based funding for graduate students is generally administered either by GPS, so graduate and postdoctoral studies, or your individual faculty or department. We also administer entrance bursaries. I'm going to talk about these in a bit more detail. Again, they apply to first-time, first-degree students, and I'll go into this a little later in the presentation. Modest McGill loans and bursaries, or what we call in-course financial aid, the work-study program, fee deferrals, the mobility opportunities. I will take a minute right now just to talk about these last three items because they don't figure too heavily into the presentation. It's important that you're aware that as a student, there is a self-service menu in Minerva where you can apply for a fee deferral. A fee deferral is an extension on your tuition billing deadline. The deferral that's available to you will depend on your situation, but you can look at them and pick the one that best applies to you. They last for different time periods according to your situation. And I'll leave it at that for now, but you can feel free to ask me more questions about those at the end. The Mobility Bursary for Exchanges is need-based funding for undergraduate students going on exchange. That would be an official McGill exchange. And Enriched Educational Opportunity funding is for undergraduate students undertaking things like unpaid internships or maybe a field semester. I'm not going to talk about those too much today because it's an optional thing that usually figures in later in your program, but I do want you to know that these types of need-based funding exist for these types of opportunities that may come into play during your time at McGill. I'd also like to mention that we are a proud member of Student Services. There's 8 offices serving students with a variety of different missions. And our united mission as Student Services is to support holistic student wellness. So you can see there's a graphic on the right-hand side of this slide, which depicts something called the wellness wheel. So there's different aspects of our wellness as we go through the student life cycle. One of them is financial, which is clearly what we're addressing today. But it's important to know that we need to take care of all aspects of our wellness to ensure that we're doing fine. One of these spokes, so to speak, being out of whack or off kilter can throw everything else off. So that's our job, is to help you with this. Where we are, as it stands right now, we're here, available to assist and serve you in a virtual environment. Normally, you would find our main office downtown on the downtown campus in the Brown Student Services building, and our regular hours are 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You can reach us by phone or come by our counter when the campus is normally open, but right now, the only way to reach us is by email. It is an effective way to reach us. We're very responsive, and I want to point out that we've been open during the entire campus closure. I think we were closed for one day at the very beginning when we switched, and we've been assisting students and offering all of our services the entire time. And the upcoming academic year will be no different. So we'll continue to offer services virtually while the campus is closed. Once it reopens, like I said, we have our main office downtown, but we are also available one day a week at the McDonald campus for those of you who may be studying there. So I welcomed you at the beginning of the presentation, but I did not yet say congratulations on your admission to McGill. I know you've all done a lot of hard work to get here and planning, and that continues now. And you may be asking yourself, now what? So one of the things we do next is making a financial plan. A lot of you have probably already started this, and we'll do an overview today of these 3 steps that will help you as you undertake making a financial plan. So step 1 involves identifying your resources or sources of funding. Step 2 involves identifying your expenses. And step 3, you'll make a budget or a financial plan. So we're going to talk about resources first. So who pays for a degree? You can see the image on this slide has 4 pillars, which consists of parents and guardians or your family, student and maybe scholarships you've brought from high school, but also income from employment, government financial assistance, and educational institutions. So that would be support from McGill itself. I want to point out that this graphic, like I said, our office predominantly serves undergraduate students, so this graphic is aimed at undergraduate students. But we know that every student's situation is unique. So the general expectation is to have these 4 pillars, but some of us might not have all of them. As an undergraduate student, my family was not able to help me financially with my studies. So I relied on myself and I worked a lot to help pay for school. I had government student loans and bursaries, and I also had a mix of scholarships and financial aid from my educational institutions. I also want to point out that the resources you have could change from year to year over your degree. So that's another reason why it's important to plan and look ahead and review your plan as you go through. So first, we'll take some time to talk about a family contribution. I just mostly have a couple of tips here, and I do want to point out that it is the office's expectation, just like the government student loan programs, that first-time, first-degree students will be getting financial support from their families according to their ability to contribute. It's important for you to communicate with your family so you know what to expect and when and how much they'll be giving you during the year. Like I said, your parents' financial information will factor into your government financial aid assessment. And if your family is not able to contribute on a regular basis, it is also good to know if you can call on them in an emergency. Sometimes things pop up unexpectedly, so your computer might need to be repaired. Any number of things can happen where you might need some money quickly and you didn't expect that. So it's good to know if they can help in a case like that. And also sometimes families contribute, but it might be in the form of a loan. So funding that you are expected to pay back. This is what we would call an informal loan because it's not coming from a bank, but it's good for you to review the quote unquote terms of your loan agreement. So when your relative that's lending you money expects to be paid back, how much of what they're giving you needs to be paid back, et cetera, et cetera. This is just a good idea so that you know whether or not you're able to meet the loan agreement and you don't want to cause any friction or problems in your personal relationships. Next, we'll take a minute to talk about McGill scholarships, which is merit-based funding, primarily awarded for academic performance. It could be combined with other achievements like leadership, and they are highly competitive. Our office does first-time, first-degree entrance scholarships. For a basic entrance scholarship, you would have been automatically considered at the time of your admission. And the major renewable did have an application, but it closed already, so you can no longer apply. But at this point, I do believe the majority, if not all of the scholarship decisions are out, so you should know. All other entrance and in-course scholarships are administered by the faculties. The way it works once you're at the university is that at the end of the academic year, you're automatically considered by your faculty. It's based on grades and the number of credits. And essentially every faculty has a budget and it's based on GPA, and they start at the top and go down. Some of these merit-based awards may also have other criteria mixed with them. So I mentioned leadership. So the faculties could be awarding based on that as well. And the in-course scholarships, just like the entrance scholarships, are also highly competitive. If you have received a scholarship, congratulations, but it's also important for you to understand the renewal criteria. So if you've received a renewable scholarship, you need to know what criteria you need to meet to renew. Currently, the criteria is a 3.5 GPA in your first year. That's a provisional GPA as you adjust. And then in subsequent years, it's a 3.7 based on 27 graded credits. It's also important for you to know the process to obtaining scholarships. So do you need to apply, or is it automatic? If it's an in-course scholarship, you need to direct the questions to your faculty about the application process. For more resources, now we're going to talk about government aid. So there's multiple jurisdictions and rules. It's important for you to inform yourself on apply to you. We do encourage students to apply as early as possible for your government financial aid to ensure you receive it in a timely fashion at the beginning of the academic year. At this point, we're mid-June, so if I know you can already apply for your US direct loans, most of the Canadian applications should be open. If they're not already, they'll be open very soon, so within the next week or two. Government aid might not be part of your plan coming into the year, let's say, but generally you can apply partway through the year, depending on your situation. I do want to point out, though, that I believe it is the Northwest Territories that has an earlier deadline, which I think is the August 31st or around the end of the summer. So it's important to inform yourself on these things to make sure you don't miss out if you think you might need this resource. I also want to point out that in the Canadian program, a lot of the governments offer a combination of loan, which is funding that does need to be paid back, although it is interest-free while you study full-time, but they also offer grants. This is funding that you do not need to pay back. So I do encourage students to apply for their government aid because you may be leaving money on the table that you don't need to pay back, and it could help you out a lot over the course of your degree. For US students, I will talk a little bit more about US government aid in a couple of minutes, but I do want to point out that because we are a foreign school, it's not possible to take the Pell Grant to our institution, although you can take your direct loans. So there's been a lot going on with Canadian government aid in the last couple of months, actually because of COVID-19, and there's been some one-time changes which are important to communicate to you so you know. I know that right now is a difficult time financially for a lot of people, and the government has put measures in place for one time, so this is 1 year, to assist people based on this. So they've doubled the Canada Student Grants, which can be now up to $6,000 for a full-time student. Borrowers will be exempt from their fixed student contribution. So normally your government aid is calculated based on you making a base contribution. Most jurisdictions, it's a contribution of $2,000. This has been waived this year. So has the spousal contribution for students who may be married or live in common law. These measures are aimed at making the program less restrictive. So more students will get assistance than, let's say, if we compare to the criteria from last year. The weekly maximum loan limit has also been increased from $210 to $350. A standard undergraduate year is 34 weeks, pardon me, so 2 terms of 17 weeks. So 140 times 17 is potentially a fairly significant additional amount of money. I also want to point out, I think there has been a lot of media attention to these benefits, the Canada Emergency Student Benefit and the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. but it's possible that you are already eligible to be getting some government benefits, which will help out if you've lost work this summer because of COVID-19. And the Canada Emergency Response Benefit has actually recently been extended by an additional 8 weeks. You can also earn up to $1,000 a month working part-time while collecting these benefits. The Canada Student Service Grant has also been implemented for students who volunteer with the COVID-19 related effort, and there's grants available from $1,000 to $5,000 to go towards your fall studies. I think they're still working the details out on this last program, but they are supposed to be shared very shortly on what's called the I Want to Help program. So, like I said, we'll talk a little bit about US direct loans. McGill is a Title IV institution, so we are able to administer unsubsidized, subsidized, Parent Plus, and Grad Plus loans. It is recommended that you complete all the steps by June 1st, but there's still time. That's largely, like I said, to make sure you're getting your funding on time at the beginning of the academic year. There are a few steps and a couple of extra one, well, one extra one, I guess, because McGill is a foreign school. So you do need to file your FAFSA. You need to complete your Master Promissory Note, or the MPN, complete entrance counseling, and then you need to submit an application to Minerva so that our office can package your loans. If you have any questions, you can contact us at us.studentaid@mcgill.ca. My colleague Diane is very friendly and knowledgeable and helpful, and she will get back to you with all your questions in good time. Now we'll take a minute to talk about McGill entrance bursaries. So this is need-based financial aid for first-time, first-degree students. It's open to all students regardless of your geographic origin. So students from Quebec, students from out of province, and US and international students. When I say first time, first degree, it does also include the law and medicine faculties. And you need to be enrolling in a full-time undergraduate degree program and have the intention to apply for and accept your maximum government student aid and demonstrate financial need. The application deadline, it's important to point out here that you are automatically considered for basic entrance scholarships, but you do need to apply for entrance financial aid. So you're not automatically considered for this. The deadline is 60 days from the date of your formal acceptance, or June 30th, whichever comes first. So June 30th definitely comes first in this instance. If you have not already applied, I would encourage you to have a look at our website for more information on the program, and you generally get your decision within 2 to 3 weeks of submitting your application. So once you're here, we have what's called in-course financial aid. This consists of bursaries, so non-repayable funding, modest McGill loans, which are repayable but interest-free while you're in studies, emergency cash loans, fee deferrals, the work-study program, and the mobility bursary for exchanges. You can apply anytime during the academic year for this. If you've received an entrance bursary, generally you would use the entrance, that would be your financial aid for your first year, and then you would apply for in-course financial aid in your subsequent years if you still have financial need. You submit an application in Minerva, and in this case, while entrance bursaries are assessed online, for in-course financial aid, you do need to schedule a one-on-one appointment with one of the financial aid counselors, like me, to review your application in order for it to be assessed. Our office will offer you a tailored package with a disbursement schedule and mode of payment based on your personal situation. I should point out here that, like I said earlier, we predominantly serve undergraduate students. So the majority of our funding is allocated accordingly. We do help graduate students as well with in-course financial aid, but with more modest amounts because there is an expectation that they're funded by their faculty or department. I also want to point out that the same rules apply here. It is open to all students regardless of your geographic origin, but I will point out that for first-year international students, the office will ask you how you proved your financial capacity to pay for your first year of study in order to obtain your study documents. So that is something that would also be considered. Another resource we're going to talk a bit about today is self-help. So part-time or full-time work is a great way to help you cover the cost of your attendance, but also gain valuable work experience and ultimately make you more employable when you finish your degree. The work-study program is a pool of on-campus jobs for students with demonstrated financial need, but I want to point out that not all on-campus jobs are work-study jobs. I also want to point out that even though the campus is currently closed, there are work-study jobs still going on remotely, just like the rest of us at the institution right now. Montreal is a cosmopolitan city, so a lot of students also choose to work off campus. And there's another student service office called CAPS, or Career and Placement Services, who can help you with things like career advising, how to search for a job. If you're an international student, you might be looking for a job in Canada for the first time and need a bit of guidance. They also have an online job posting platform called My Future, and so students can find jobs through there. And I want to point out, sometimes I will talk to students and maybe they're a bit discouraged, what difference is a minimum wage job, for example, going to make? But a part-time job, 8 hours a week during the 8-month academic year over the course of an undergraduate degree could earn you $13,600 over the course of 4 years. So that's a pretty significant amount of money that adds up over time. Minimum wage in Quebec is $12.50 an hour. I believe the majority of the work-study positions start at $13.85 an hour, so a little bit better than minimum wage. And, working during the summer, you have the availability to work full-time. And these are all ways you can really help yourself out with your cost of attendance. So we're moving on to step 2, which is to identify your expenses. I want to point out first and foremost that tuition and fees are due at the beginning of each term. And if you have any questions related to fees and payments, those should be directed to student accounts, and they manage that end of the money picture at McGill. Your expenses will be broken down into 2 categories. So you'll have monthly fixed expenses and monthly variable expenses. I should also mention that you're going to have some one-time expenses. So at the beginning of your degree, you might be buying a computer and related equipment. If you're moving out for the first time, you might need to buy things like towels and sheets. If you're coming to Montreal from a warmer climate, you're also going to need to invest in some good winter gear. So as you plan your budget for your first year, these are some of the things you need to consider in addition to your tuition and your monthly expenses. Like I said, some of those expenses will be fixed, so they'll be the same each month. Things like your rent, your phone plan, your Metro pass, and the expenses that can change from month to month. So food, clothing, etc., etc. Online on our website, you can find a kit that's designed to help you plan and develop your budget. There's also some guidelines in that kit, which I'll talk about a little bit later. If it's your first time building a budget, it will help you figure out how much you should be spending on what. And I think that mostly covers it. I will point out when we're looking at this slide, some of my tips. Food is a category where it's one of the easiest places you can save money, I should say. So by cooking at home and packing a lunch versus eating out, but also overspend. So if you're picking up a lot of takeout, coffee, it can really add up over the course of the year. And amusements is another category where we find students often spend more than they think they're spending. Another thing I should mention is we know right now the fall semester is online, but the university is hoping to have an in-person semester for the winter term. So it's possible that your fall budget is going to look different from your winter budget. So in terms of expenses, it's important for you to find a way to track your spending. That's really the only way to know how much money is going out the door and what you're spending it on. On this page, I have hyperlinks to different tools you can use to help you track your expenses. Sarah will be sharing the presentation with you, so you will get a chance to be able to look at these in a little more detail. And my point on this slide is just to demonstrate that there's a lot of different options available to you. Some of them are a little more interactive. I meet some students who carry a little book around with them and they write down everything they spend. Some students use apps. Banks will provide apps. There's some you can find online. Piece of advice I would offer there is just to be conscious of the product you're consuming and in terms of security, because some of them may ask to link to your bank account. So to be a conscious consumer. We have the toolkit designed by our office. Another really great resource on this page is the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, which has a monthly budget template available to you, but they also have a lot of other really great tools for things like comparing borrowing and credit products to help you find the things that are best for you. Tracking your expenses is also going to allow you to learn about yourself and your spending habits, and it's really helpful and informative. So once we've done step 1 and 2, we can make a budget. So the budget is a plan for how you manage your money, and it helps you figure out what's coming in and what's going out and what you maybe keep for savings, or if you have some longer term financial goals. If you're not sure where to start, you can start by tracking your expenses actually. So after a couple of months, that'll give you an idea of how much you're spending and you can set your budget according to that. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, today is really an overview. So if you're hungry for a little more information and assistance on learning how to budget, we do offer a full-length webinar on budgeting in the fall. In the bottom right-hand part of this slide is what we call the budget pie. So this kind of represents all the money you have for a monthly expense and how you break it up between the different categories. So things like your rent and your food, and these guidelines are implemented into the Frugal Scholar Toolkit to help you get an idea of how you should be allocating money. That being said, everybody's different, everyone's situation's different, and these are guidelines to give you an idea, but obviously your situation might not look exactly like this, but it's a good starting point. So now you're ready to do the math. So you have your total resources. You can take away your tuition and fees and maybe some of those one-time expenses I mentioned, like a computer and some good winter clothing. And this will leave you with your resources for living expenses. You're going to divide this amount by either 8 or 12, depending how many months of the year you're supporting yourself. And this is going to give you the amount of money you have to live on each month. you're going to take away your monthly expenses that you've added up from the monthly budget amount, and you're going to see whether or not you have a surplus or a deficit. A surplus means you have more than enough money. So that's good news. Although it might not be by much. So just because you have a surplus doesn't mean that you can just sit back and take it easy and go on cruise control, I guess. It's important to track your expenses to make sure you stay within that, because if you have a modest surplus, let's say $1,000, which might sound like a lot of money, but if we're looking at an 8-month or 12-month year, you could easily eat through that surplus by spending about $75 a month and end up having a deficit. If you have a deficit, that means you don't have quite enough money to cover all the expenses you've planned out for the year. So what you're going to do in this case is go back and look at the resources section, see if there's resources you have not accessed that you could to increase the amount of money you have available to cover your expenses. You can also review your budget and see if you're going to be able to reduce it. And a helpful way to do this is by evaluating your needs and your wants. So we need to pay our rent every month and buy our groceries, but there's categories in our budget like amusements, which is discretionary. It's up to you how much you spend on that category. So you might need to cut down on the wants a little bit to make sure that you can meet all of your expenses. And often resolving something like this is really a matter of accessing or combining several strategies. So maybe you're going to find a part-time job to supplement your resources, but also cut your expenses a little bit to make sure that everything balances. During your education, it's what I call a heavy spend, low income phase. So your ultimate goal here is really to try and break even. Maybe you're able to set a bit of money aside in an emergency fund or some savings if you're planning to do something like go on student exchange later in your degree. But ultimate goal right now for the next few years is to try and break even. So I just want to take a minute to talk about some of the benefits of budgeting, which kind of brings us back to the wellness wheel. So making a budget and managing your expenses actually has a lot of positive impacts on you and your personal wellness. So there's lots of studies that prove it reduces your stress and it helps you sleep better. It also helps you control your finances and focus on achieve goals. So I just used that example of going on exchange. You'll become a smarter and more discerning consumer and understand the financial difference between wants and needs. You'll build good habits for the future. We all have to deal with money for every day of our lives. So this is going to help you while you get through school, but it's also going to help you beyond that. And one of the really strong benefits is it allows you to be proactive. So if you forecast your budget for the next 8 months right now, you're going to be able to see that there might be a problem at the end of the year, let's say meeting your rent in April, as opposed to figuring it out in March when you see that your bank balance is not quite enough. With that much advance warning, you're able to adjust and have a lot of time to fix the issue before it even becomes a problem. So in terms of resources, I mentioned a lot of these as we went through the presentation. We have the Daily Living Toolkit. The second bullet, cut your expenses, is the something called the cheap sheet. It was developed by students at McGill, and it's a little guide to all things cheap in Montreal. So the cheap grocery stores, cheap places to get clothing, cheap and free entertainment. There's something called the Dollar Cinema. There's all kinds of things like that in that book to help you manage your expenses, but still be able to enjoy yourself and have fun. This year is exceptional, but Montreal is also a really great city for all kinds of free festivals and activities during the summer. We have the Frugal Scholar Money Management Program, so a series of workshops in order to help you. Like I said, there's one-on-one advising available from our office. You can also follow our office on Facebook or Twitter at McGill Aid, where we share tips and events, things like that that could be relevant to you. And the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, again, is a really great resource. So with that, my final tips are to make a budget and track your expenses. I know I've said this a few times now, but it's really the only way to do it, but it's important for you to find a way that works for you. And repeat, budgeting takes practice. It will take a few tries. You might not get there right away, but you will get there eventually. You'll learn something every time. And it is going to help you a lot over the course of your degree. Attend our full-length Budgeting 101 workshop. And remember that our office is here to help you. So if you don't know what to do, you want someone else to look at it and get a second opinion, you can email us with your questions. You can call and set up an appointment for advising. So remember that there's help. So that is it for the presentation, which gives us lots of time for your questions.
Great. I also enabled people to unmute themselves if they'd like to ask any questions out loud. Totally okay if not, though. And I'll just get through some of the ones that we had in the chat that I wasn't 100% sure about. One of them was, let me just find it. Are students with entrance bursaries automatically eligible for the work-study program?
Okay, that's a great question. So if you've gotten an entrance bursary, are you automatically eligible for the